Go ahead and get started. We're going to start now with the Derek Chauvin trial. Like I said, the trial of Derek Chauvin, he is on trial for murder of George Floyd. He's a former police officer who was called to the scene to arrest George Floyd for, I believe, using a fake $20 bill for a purchase and potentially drug use and things like that. So he was called to that scene, and what the initial video that we all saw, and I don't want to replay it because it's still, even with the extra knowledge I know of what was going on and things like that, it's still really hard to watch, and it's not a good thing to watch. So I'm not going to show it here. If you want to see it, it's on YouTube, it's on Rumble, it's on all the video platforms. Go ahead and find it yourself. But we'll go over the what's going on in the trial. Right now, the trial is not going well for the prosecution. Okay? I've been following it. I've watched some of the testimony, and it really, if I had to guess right now, if you took all the political aspects out of this case, if this was just kind of your average, okay, there was a cop who may have did something wrong and now he's on trial for killing somebody. If you take all the political ramifications out of this, I would say Derek Chauvin would be acquitted of all charges, not just murder, because he's on trial for murder in the second degree, murder in the third degree, and manslaughter. So all those charges are up for discussion. If I had to guess right now, if you took the politics out of it, he would be cleared of all charges as it sits right now. Considering the politics, I think what is going to happen, I will put a bet that he's going to be convicted of manslaughter. He's not going to get more than 10 years. And that's really going to be about it. So let me go over some of the testimony here. It, like I said, has not been going well for the prosecution. And I believe it was day 7, because I'm looking here at Legal Insurrection. They've been a great source of information on this trial, because if you just Google Derek Chauvin or George Floyd trial, anything like that, you're getting a lot of stuff that is not happening. So what you're seeing on the in the news, like if you just do a Google search, and what is actually happening in the courtroom, those are not the same things. They are like almost polar opposites. That is not what the jury is seeing. And so if you're only just reading the headline, state witness says George Floyd was killed by asphyxiation. That may be true, but they're not giving you the other side of that. So Legal Insurrection has actually gone through and said, well, if put themselves in the place of a juror, and these are lawyers that actually write up this column. So it's they've done a great job on this. So I've been using them mostly as my source for what's going on in the trial when I can't watch other parts of the trial. So let's start with this. So the state called in a lot of experts. So the main one was their use of force trainers. The Minneapolis Police Department, Johnny Mercil, I believe his name is, and he's the use of force trainer for the city of Minneapolis Police Department. Well, things did not go well for a lot of the testimony when the state called their witnesses. It wasn't good. So let's just start from here. So Nelson began by asking questions related to Mercil's time as a street cop, and I believe Nelson is Derek Chauvin's his attorney. So he began by asking questions about Mercil's time as a street cop, with a particular emphasis on tendencies of suspects being subject to arrest to come up with all kinds of nonsense about why they shouldn't be arrested that day. So he would ask him, "It's a dangerous job being a police officer." Yes. People are generally unhappy about being arrested. Very rarely are people happy to be arrested, is something Mercil said. Do suspects frequently engage in a wide variety of behavior to avoid arrest, including fighting, arguing, making excuses? Yes, they do, answered Mercil. So this happens across the board. So, indeed, when asked himself, so when he was asked, when Mercil was asked, have you ever disbelieved a suspect's claim of medical emergency as an apparent effort to avoid arrest? Mercil answered that he personally has done so. So in other words, he has had people when he's arresting somebody tell them, "Oh, I don't feel good. Oh, my arm hurts. Oh, this, that, the other." He's had all that happen to him. Now, here's the thing. All of this undercuts, and this is from legal insurrection, all of this undercuts the part of the prosecution narrative that is relying on Floyd's purported pleas and excuses about claustrophobia and anxiety and crying out for mama. Now, that could have all been real. He might have been doing that, but a reasonable officer would have said this is just a way for him to try to get out of being arrested. So that's something that cops have to deal with every day, especially if you're in a bigger city. So in the U.S., a lot of bigger cities, you're going to have more arrests because you have more people crammed in together. They tend to not like each other after a while. So you're going to have this, and cops have to listen to this every day. Hey, you're under arrest. You broke the law. I got to take you in. And there's always some excuse, and there's always something. So a reasonable officer would have been, oh, okay, well, he's probably just trying to get out of being arrested because we have to arrest him. So there is that. Now, the defense attorney Nelson also once again put the use of pressure and body weight techniques in a favorable light. So basically, here's what happened: is we all saw the video. We saw George Floyd face down with his hands behind his back with a grown man's knee on the back of his neck. That's what we saw. During this conversation, the state was obviously trying to keep that focus on there, like, hey, his knee on his neck is bad, and that's what led to him asphyxiating and dying. However, the use of pressure and body weight to restrain a suspect was adopted by the Minneapolis Police Department because it was a lesser intensity of force than the prior practice of using strikes, either barehanded or with batons or even with weighted gloves, to compel compliance. Mercil actually agreed with that. So what we have here is that knee on the neck was actually being taught to Minneapolis police officers on how to restrain people that they were arresting, because it was a lesser option. It was a lesser use of force than what they were doing before, which is beating the shit out of people. So this is basically the prosecution's own witness said this is fine. This is actually a lesser form of what's the freaking term here? The lesser intensity of force. So it's a lesser of two evils when you're doing something like this. Basically, what the jury saw was that Derek Chauvin, in acting the way he did, was actually better than what he could have done. Because also in this situation, they were told, the jury was also told throughout the last 7 days, they were told, actually, when we see the body cam footage of Floyd actually being arrested, not the 9-minute video that we all saw with him just dying right there in the street. Preceding that, the police released the body cam footage. You see him resisting arrest. You see him trying to hide evidence that he's making a drug deal. So, based on the circumstances, the state had a witness tell the jury that technically they could have tased him. They could have just tased George Floyd, and that would have been perfectly fine. So this trial is not going well. And I mean, there are conspiracy theorists online. This is how bad the actual state's evidence is going. They actually have conspiracy theories online saying that they think the state is actively trying to lose this case. And there's several different reasons. I don't know, with our system of criminal justice, prosecutors don't want to lose. I don't think that's the case here. There's a certain level of ego that they have to take into themselves. But what I'm seeing here is, if you're going with the conspiracy theory, they're making the case that, hey, they probably want to lose, because if they send Derek Chauvin to jail for doing what he was trained to do, and that's what it looks like was going on here, if they're going to send him to jail, they might have a whole bunch of officers either transfer to some other state or some other city, some other town, or you might have a whole bunch of them just retire if they're close enough to retirement age, and you might have a bunch of cops just quit and say, no, you know what, I'm going to go pursue other endeavors. So I think that's one conspiracy theory. The other conspiracy theory is that if they are trying to lose this case, it's because they think they can get more funding for their police departments, because they did the whole defund the police in Minneapolis, and their murder rates have shot up, unsurprisingly. But they think they can get some of that funding from the federal government back, or at least in the short term, get some National Guard presence more permanent in their city, while they train new police officers to come in and do the job, because there's going to be rioting. No matter what happens, there's going to be rioting. That's my prediction on this one here. So this has not gone well. I mean, the prosecution's witness, even they had a witness try to say that it was a blood choke. A knee to the neck is not a blood choke. All right. I mean, I've competed in jiu-jitsu tournaments before. A blood choke requires both the carotid arteries to be cut off. I think anybody if you've watched a UFC or Bellator fight, if you watch any MMA fights, when somebody gets the whole rear naked choke, which is basically a sleeper hold for the WWE fans out there, the sleeper hold, you have your bicep on one side, you have your forearm on the other side, you're squeezing that together, and it's mostly a blood choke. It's cutting off blood supply to your brain. Now, that'll make you pass out, depending on your size and how strong the person is. Maybe not how strong, but just how tight the hold is. You could be out in 5 seconds. You could be out in 10 seconds. 10 seconds is about right. And eventually it does cut off your ability to breathe too. So that is not a blood choke, putting your neck on the back, or putting your knee on the back of the neck. Also, putting the knee on the back of the neck is, well, they did have here's the things. They had a witness come in and say, well, actually, based on what I can see on this video, he probably had it on his neck a little bit of the time, but also he probably had it mostly like on his shoulder. So kind of across his shoulder blade. So it looks like Chauvin, based on the videos, is moving around. So based on some extra video we have, he's moving around. So it's on his neck a little bit. It's on his shoulder a different time. It's moved back to his neck. So there's a lot of things in play here that are just not adding up properly for the prosecution. There are other things going on here as well. For example, some additional factors that a reasonable officer would take into account when deciding how much force to apply is the disparity in size. So, okay, back when I was in decent shape, I'm about 5'7", and when I was in good shape, I was probably about 10% body fat, so I was about 145 pounds. So that's when I was running half marathons, and really I worked at a gym, so I had free gym membership all the time, so I just work out after work. Before I got married, so I didn't have a girlfriend or anybody to say, hey, come home, so I just stayed at work. He's basically my size. Derek Chauvin, apparently at the time of the arrest, he's 5'9", 140 pounds. He is a tiny, tiny person. Okay, he's skinny. He's a skinny dude. George Floyd is 6'6", over 230 pounds. So that is, you have to take that into account too, the amount of force that you're willing to apply. You're talking about a very small person compared to a very large person. So that's something that got to be taken into effect. There are other things, like I said earlier, one of the people said, no, he could have actually tased him. He did not tase him. He was trying to find a lesser form of, not punishment, but an easier way, something that did less damage to Floyd. So you have to remember, all this stuff is coming out, and this is the prosecution's, they're the ones trying to make the case. This guy should go to jail for murder. And they are not making that case whatsoever. It has been awful. Every single time they send somebody to the stand to testify, that person comes out and makes the point so they can get the headline that says, yeah, our expert said that George Floyd was murdered. Well, the news media is not reporting the other half of that, which is the defense coming up and saying, well, okay, great. That's all well and good. But what about this? And then that same witness basically backing up the entire defense's case. So you are not seeing that. What you are seeing is the media basically setting up the whole if it bleeds, it leads. Because I believe that the mainstream media, I will throw CNN, obviously, New York Times, obviously, I believe Fox News as well. I believe all of these big corporate media outlets, they want more riots. They want more riots. And I think they're going to get them based on how this is going.